Good morning, Network Nation. Your console, Ron G, coming to you today with a distinct one for the Network Nation community, those of you especially in the corporate sector. Today's video is labeled the top 5 mistakes that my corporate friends have to stop making. The top 5 mistakes that my corporate friends, yes, my dear corporate friends, have to stop making. We're going to start with number 5. The first mistake we must stop making in the corporate sector is we have to stop neglecting learning new things. Now, this is touching on a very sensitive type topic because a lot of us in the corporate sector, we have gone through certain levels and phases. For those of you that come out of the 80s and the 90s, we were conditioned, get through the schooling, get the education, or apply for those big federal jobs, those big city jobs. And so what we did, we applied over and over again. And when we got those positions, we had the feeling of arrival. Why do I say that? Well, most of those types of jobs, heavy union type jobs, jobs that have the tendency to level you up every so many years. In the unions trades, you can get 2, 3, 4 years, and then there's a new contract. And so what happens is you have a tendency, because you're continually getting these little raises, and then there are certain situations, if you work for some companies like the Bell companies, the postal companies, a lot of the city workers, you can maybe transfer. Let's say one day you're like a bus driver, then you maybe go and work at the parts department, or you work in the school system. So there's a lot of potential of movement where you have a tendency to feel like everything that's going on inside that universe is sufficient and it's enough. This is the very first mistake that we have to stop making. We have to stop learning things that may even be outside the sector. Which brings me to number 4. Never stop developing, right, and expanding on the what? Skills you already owned, right? You already had these skills naturally. What am I talking about? A lot of you are natural musicians. A lot of you are natural authors. A lot of you are natural techies, right? Meaning that natural mechanics, meaning that you had skills before you landed with the big time corporation that you just were very good at. And maybe once you started working and you got into this corporate sector, and now all of a sudden, you're working, a lot of these hours or whatever, and now those little trades, those little skills that you had, they kind of go neglected. You go in there and you see dust sitting on the piano, pens that aren't writing, a lot of beautiful, wonderful gifts and hobbies that you possess that you kind of just left it, just ain't got time for that. And so what happens is that just like the learning, those things that you had naturally that you could work through, they're all gone now. And, that's it, right? So those things kind of leave you. Number 3, here's the big one, my corporate friend. You start doing that and you start trading too much of your what? Time. What is the one thing, listening at home, you can never get back? Nope, it's not your money. It's not your ex-girlfriend. It's time. It never comes back. Too much trading time for dollars, right? And so there's too much of that. It's too much trading time for dollars. And, a lot of times it could be other things that you do. And I know, preaching to the choir here, so I'm throwing myself on the bus. I would take an extra job, take an extra trade, come in on the weekends, come in on Sundays, you know what I'm saying? And I was doing a lot of these things, in that corporate world because that was what good employees did. And you kind of, you puff your chest out, and in a lot of ways you felt like you were really, really doing some things. And for the most part, that's what it felt like because you were putting a lot of extra hours, a lot of extra time. And what was happening is, yeah, you're right. You see how it goes back to number 5 and number 4? A lot of neglect with those types of things that you could have been doing with that extra time, and then you were doing a lot of the overtime. And let me tell you guys something. I know you already know this, my corporate buddies. You've looked at the taxes. Sometimes the overtime is not even worth the ink that's on the check before the tax man hits that overtime. You know, so that's another thing. Too much time for money. Number 2 or 3, 2. Yeah, all my football people, we just don't play good defense. We don't play good defense when we're in the corporate sector. We just don't. Like, we don't realize and protect the very thing that is actually contributing to the bottom line. What am I saying, right? Who am I? I'm me. I'm standing in this camera, right? And what happens is this. If I don't put in the defense system to protect the power of the income that I produce, then not only am I letting myself down, but I'm letting my family. We don't have enough tools, resources. We don't protect our health against injury. We don't protect ourselves against time out of work. We don't protect ourselves against unexpected happenings, maybe something happens with the car or whatever. We don't put enough defensive mechanisms in place. We don't have nearly enough types of insurances to protect us against a rainy day. Hardly no life insurance. A lot of us put way too much trust in the products that are offered to us. We don't have enough. In other words, you need to know what you bring to the table. And for any reason, if you're going to be missing from action, meaning this action, for any extended period of time, you have to have the types of insurances in place to cover that loss of time. Okay? So there's not enough solid defense. And then again, there's not enough stat cushions, right? Cushions of things that we can get to in the event of emergencies, not enough liquid to get our hands on. So I'm going to say we just don't play good enough defense in the corporate sector. Because remember, like I said here, when you're doing a lot of trading time and for your money, it does affect the sharpness of how you think and how you plan things out. Because again, as you keep on the hamster wheel of chase, you don't have the time to slow down, Tiger, and think more fluidly in the way that you could to protect yourself against this. And the number one thing that gets the corporate sector, it never fails, is we put entirely too much trust. What? Too much trust. Too much trust in the corporate system. Way too much trust. How do I know that? Because these things here come back to haunt us in ways we can't imagine. Too much trust in the corporate sector's retirement plans. Think about it. A lot of us are putting, resources in like these 401ks and different things like that. Not only to realize that the day of retirement, or when we get close to retirement, we start looking at the little counselors and they're sitting in the lunchroom or whatever, and they're going over your numbers. And you're looking at these numbers, and you're like, are you kidding me? I can't afford to retire off of that, right? And you realize, your corporate might have a little $40,000 or $30,000 life insurance policy. You're like, 40 or 30,000. If something happens to me, 40 or 30,000 is it's not gonna help me protect this against that. You know what I mean? I bring more than that in to my household a year. So that's not gonna do anything for me. And then we have these little things that, something happens, or you get sick, you might not even have anything. Another thing, we put a lot of investment in the energy of these companies. And remember now, these companies are taking so much of our energy away that we're not doing what? Not learning new skills, new trades, new things. We're not developing the techniques and the tools that we should have. Instead of building and putting into these things, we're putting more money into these corporations. And what happens is that if the doors of these corporations, for whatever reason, have to close, or they have to cut back, And now we've spent 15, 20, 25 years in a corporation. Where do we go if the doors close to these corporations? What do we do? What do we fall back on? What skill sets do we fall back on? What certificates do we fall back on? What trades do we fall back on? Oh, wait a minute. We weren't developing those things. We were pouring everything into these corporations. Oh, wait a minute. What about these savings plans and things like that? Well, the corporations didn't really have great savings plans. A lot of those savings plans were tied to the success of those corporations. And when the corporations start to go down, what are we going to do? And see, so that's the thing that I wanted to say. We have to stop making these mistakes, and we literally have to stop making them today. We have to change our strategies and our approach and not put everything in the world in the hands of a corporation. I hope this helps. Ron G, the Network Nation, your console. Let's talk soon. You know what to do. Like it, click it, subscribe it, and send it out. Peace, I'm with you always.
I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no I push play. I won't stop till I make a change.